Rn. Then we talked about continuous functions. Suppose we have f from some subset x to Rn. Then f is said to be continuous if for every open subset here, f inverse u must be open in X or relatively open. That means f inverse u must be of the form some open set here, but open set there will be of the form some open set in Rn because X is a so suppose I take this as Rn. So f inverse u should be of the form some open subset V in Rn, some V intersection Rn. X is subset of Rn, where V intersection X, where V is V open in Rn. That means open subset here are having inverse image here open in the relative topology. That is what F continuous from X to Rn means. Okay. This also we discussed. Then we said, suppose you have two so X and Y, X in Rn, Y in Rn. We say that F is a homeomorphism if F is continuous, F is 1, 1, on 2, and F inverse also continuous. Then we said this two spaces are homeomorphic. Okay, this we have seen yesterday. And what we said is it is like groups are identified using isomorphism. Topological spaces are identified using homeomorphism. Why we are saying like that? Yesterday we said because if I take U open in X, if and only if F of U open in Y. If F is a homeomorphism, then from X to Y, this is a homeomorphism, then U open in X, if and only if F of U open in X, if and only, because F inverse is also continuous, therefore F of U is open in Y. Similarly, if F of U open in Y, F inverse continuous, because of that U open in X. Therefore, we are identifying open subsets here and here using this maps in both the topological spaces. And topology is nothing but talking about open subsets or closeness of points. So that is identified by this F means these two are topologically equivalent. So homeomorphism gives topologically equivalent topological spaces. Are you able, all of you able to hear me and see the board clearly?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, this we have discussed yesterday. And as an example, I can give F from say R to R, F of X equal to X cube. What is X cube? X, if I wanted to draw this graph of X cube, it is something like this. Okay, and R is the line. So this curve I can straighten and get this using a continuous process. Yesterday we discussed what are all topological properties. Those properties which invariant under deformations. So I can just stretch this, I will get this real line. So these two are equivalent as far as topology is concerned. Topology is concerned. Therefore, this function is in fact a homeomorphism. That you can check whether it is 1, 1, 1, 2, inverse also continuous. F continuous also you have to prove. This we have discussed once. Okay, Fx equal to x square, etc. Okay, so this is one example. Now we wanted to go to, so I have looked at the topological properties, or I have introduced topology using the Euclidean metric there. In fact, I have used that metric there to define the open ball. No? Okay. Now we wanted to look at calculus on Rn. Suppose I have some open subset U in Rn and W in Rn. Or I'll just start with U in Rn. Then let f be a function from U to Rn. Okay, before going into the calculus, I wanted to look at two properties of a topological space. You may be knowing what is meant by Hausdorff space. Because this also will be using while defining manifolds. Hausdorff space means, suppose in a topological space, if you take any 2 points, I can separate them with open sets. That means I can find out U comma V open sets containing these points X and Y. So X is in U, U open. Y is in V, V is also open. And U intersection V is empty. Such spaces are called Hausdorff spaces. And see, this you have formed using metric. So I will look at X and Y. Suppose I will look at the distance between X and Y. Suppose that distance is delta. For this X, I will take some radius R1 equal to delta by 3. For this Y also I can take delta by 3, so that I will get small ball centered at X and another ball centered at Y of radius delta by 3, and they will not intersect because the total distance is delta. Okay. Therefore, this space is going to be Hausdorff. Rn is going to be Hausdorff. Another property I want to look at is second countable. In this topology course, have you seen this second countability? Anyone introduced second countable spaces?
No, sir.
If you basis, you know, for example, here I said the initial open sets I consider are open balls. They are the basic open sets. Other open sets I can write as union of that, etc. Okay, so you have a basis for Rn. If that basis is countable, then we say that the topological space is second countable. So in Rn, how can you produce a countable basis? Suppose you look at R2. Now you look at, or first you look at real line. Okay. Now you look at rationals. Set of all rationals. It is countable. Is that clear? Set of rationals countable?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Then,
sir.
yeah. Then what I will do is I will consider intervals of some radius epsilon or some radius r of all rationals. So I will take rationals, say q1, q2, etc. from qi is from q. Then I will form the ball of some radius r of qi. For each qi I am considering this. So I'll get a collection of open balls where qi belongs to q. Here open ball I mean open interval. Okay. Will it cover R? Will this
Yes,
set
sir.
cover entire R? You know q is dense in R. So this will cover the entire R. Therefore, this is going to give you a collection of countable open intervals covering this R. So that you can take as a countable basis. So this is second countable. And when you go to R2, we know the basic open sets. By my definition, it is disk, open disk. So you look at all Q cross Q. It is a subset of R2. This also we have discussed when we discussed continuity, etc. last time. So this is in R2 and it is dense in R2. That also we have proved at that time. Any point, if you give x comma y, I can produce a sequence of rationals converging to that. Similarly, for irrationals also we have done. So this is Q is countable, therefore Q cross Q is countable, and it is dense in R2. So I'll take points xy from Q cross Q. I'll call it as say P or something. Then look at ball centered at P of some radius R, and I'll vary P over all Q cross Q. That will cover the entire R2. So I'll get a countable basis for R2. So R2 is also second countable. Same way I can, by induction, I can take Q cross Q in R3, etc. Rn is also having countable base. So this is Hausdorff second countable. Okay. This property I will be using later. Now we are looking at functions from U to Rm, where U is open subset of Rn. Then I can write f equal to f1, f2, etc., fm, where each fi is a function from U to R, real valued function. So this f will have these m component functions because it is having image in Rm, m tuples. Okay. Now we know continuous, already I have defined. Continuous means open sets here has inverse images open. In epsilon delta definition, if you show that all f1, f2, etc., fm are continuous, then also f is continuous. Okay. So a continuous function we usually call f is C0 means f is continuous. Okay, this is definition. F is a C0 function means f is a continuous function from U to Rm. Now, you also know what is meant by derivative. Suppose I have a function f from U to Rm. F is differentiable at x means there exists a linear map I denote it by df suffix x from Rn to Rm. Both are vector spaces. Yesterday we have seen how this is a vector space. I just mentioned that from Rn to Rm. And those who are not familiar with the linear map means it, suppose L is a linear map from Rn to Rm means L of x plus y equal to Lx plus Ly. And scaling also it preserves. It preserves in the sense lambda into Ly. It respects both addition, vector addition and scaling. Such maps are called linear maps. So f is differentiable at x means there exists a linear map dfx from Rn to Rm which approximates f of x plus h minus f of x in a neighborhood of h equal to 0. This is what linearization of a map. F is a given function from U to Rm. Then f is said to be differentiable at x means f has got a linearization. You can approximate f with a linear map dfx from Rn to Rm, where you are approximating not throughout that only. You can approximate that with this function fx plus h minus fx in a neighborhood of h equal to 0. That means you are slightly giving an increment. Then as h tends to 0, what is happening to the function? That change that is going to give you the linearization of the given function. You might have seen it in this form. See, in the case of one dimension, That means f is from an interval to R. Some interval AB, open interval AB to R. This is an open set in R. This is the Euclidean space n equal to 1. You have the usual topology there, which already we discussed using intervals, etc. So here it is differentiable at x means limit h tends to 0, f of x plus h minus f of x by h exists. And these are all real numbers. So this exists means you will get a real number. That real number is the derivative of f at x. Or we used to write minus f prime at x into h equal to 0. This way also you might have seen. Either you say like this or you say that this limit exists. Okay. Now what is this f prime x? F prime x is a real number. And a real number, suppose I call it as alpha. A real number is I can look at as a map from R to R. Take any R here to alpha into R. That is the map. It is a linear map. Therefore, this derivative of f at the point x I can consider as a linear map. Therefore, I will say f prime x is a member of linear map from R to R. That this is the notation, linear map from R to R. Same way I have imitated that here also. I'll say that f is differentiable at x, where f is a function from some open subset of Rn to Rm. We say that it is differentiable at a point means there exists a linear map. In this case, both this is also one dimension, this is also one dimension. Therefore, linear map from R to R. In this case, it is from Rn to Rm. Linear map from Rn to Rm. So the notation for that is this dfx is a member of Lrn Rm. So if I write it in this form, how it looks like. So in this case also, what this fellow is doing, f prime x is doing, it is linearizing the fx plus, it is approximating fx plus h minus fx in the neighborhood of h equal to 0. You are taking limit h tends to 0. Okay. So same thing only you have in the one dimensional case that we have imitated here. So different derivative exists at x means there is a linear map. I denote it by dfx from Rn to Rm, which approximate fx plus h minus fx in the neighborhood of h equal to 0. Or in this form, if you want to write that, limit f of x plus h minus f of x minus dfx at h divided by h. But if I wanted to take limit means these are vectors now, because f of some x will be a vector in Rm. Therefore, I need to go for the real numbers. So yesterday we introduced the norm. I put only single line. So this goes to 0. So f of x plus h minus fx d minus dfx acting at x by norm of h, this should be 0. Just imitating what we have done in the one dimensional case. That means what we are saying is you are approximating this fx minus fx with dfx at as h tends to 0. This number, this is in Rn. This h is in Rn, in fact. You are giving an increment for this x in u. Therefore, h is in Rn. So that as it goes to 0. So it is in the neighborhood of h equal to 0. Therefore, this dfx is a mapping from Rn to Rm, taking any h to dfx h in this neighborhood. Okay, take in this as a map from Rn to Rm. So this linear map is called the derivative of f at the point x. You might have also studied partial
Excuse-
derivatives. Yes.
Sir, we can't see the little bit upper portion of board. So please,
Oh, I see. I see. Shall I write it again? Limit norm of h tends to 0, f of x plus h minus f of x minus dfx acting at h, norm of this divided by norm of h, this equal to 0. Then we say that dfx is the derivative of f at the point x for the function f from u to Rm. Derivative of f at the point x exists. If this happens, where this is a linear map from Rn to Rm. So is that clear? Derivative is clear?
yes, sir.
Okay. Now you might have studied partial derivatives. What is the relation between these two? Partial derivative and this I call total derivative or pressure derivative. Okay. So partial derivative means you have the function f from u to Rm. U is in Rn. So u depends on f depends on n variables. Suppose I fix all the variables except xi. Then I give some increment here. That means I look at f of x1, x2, etc., xi plus some h, xi plus 1, etc., xn, minus f of x1, x2, etc., xn. Then by h, limit h tends to 0. Here I am giving increment by a real number. So here increment given only to the ith coordinate. Suppose this limit exists, we call that as the partial derivative of f with respect to xi. Partial derivative of f with respect to xi. This you might have already studied. Okay. Now, how you can connect this with the total derivative df, which is a linear map. Have you seen that? Have you studied this? How you are connecting this partial derivatives with the total derivative? So this is again a map from u to R. And df at the point x, this also at some point x only we are doing. No? This is a map from Rn to Rm. Or if I look at df, it is a map from u to the linear transformations Rn to Rm. Because at each point x, if I differentiate, I am getting a linear map. Derivative is a linear map.
Do you need a norm on the numerator of that?
Yeah,
partial?
that is what I have put.
Do you need it?
Oh, it is a real value. No.
No,
Yeah.
you didn't.
Because this is in Rm, no?
Yeah, vectors.
These are vectors. This
Yeah.
is in Rm. This also in Rm.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
But partial derivatives are usually defined for functions from u to r.
Yeah, because okay. What you want to say is that suppose I take
It's from u to r.
yeah, then there is no need of, because see why we go for that is this f I have f1, f2, etc. fn. Each fi is from u to r. So I'll put this because I am looking at f as f1, f2, etc. Okay, so for real valued functions on vectors, we define partial derivative. It depends on n vectors and values in the real numbers. So you have this. Okay, so there is no need of norm or anything because they are real numbers. So now both these things are clear, no? So total derivative as a linear map, then partial derivative for any function from vectors to real numbers. You have that function is depending upon x1, x2, etc. xn. So you fix all the other vectors, only vary one coordinate xi, then you will get partial derivative with respect to xi. Okay, now this if you have a function from AB to R, what we have observed is this derivative f prime at a point x is a real number we have seen. Now suppose I have a subset u in R2 and a function f from u to R. Okay, I wanted to look at its derivative. So with this experience, what I will do is I will take, since it is u is in R2, I will take a number in R2 and I will write limit f of, I look at some xy, I wanted to have derivative at the point xy. So I will look at x plus h, comma y plus k minus f of xy minus this like this f prime x multiplied with h. You observe that f of x plus h minus f of x minus f prime x into h by h. Limit h tends to 0. This should be 0 if derivative exists. Same kind of thing I wanted to look at here also. So I will have alpha h minus beta k by h comma k. This is a vector, so I will take norm. And here it is all real numbers. Suppose this, I'll put only single line. Suppose this goes to 0, then I will say that f is differentiable and derivative of f at this point xy, this is nothing but this alpha comma beta. That means derivative acting on some h comma k, this will be nothing but this alpha comma beta acting on the vector hk. That means I'll get alpha h plus beta k. So in the one variable case, what we have seen is if f is having derivative at the point x, then you have f of x plus h minus fx minus f prime x h by h, limit h tends to 0. This equal to 0. Same thing, I wanted to look at a function f from u to r, where you use an open subset of R2 now. Now, suppose there exists a vector R2 in R2, alpha beta, satisfying this condition, limit f of x plus h y plus k minus f of xy minus alpha h minus beta k equal to 0 by norm of hk equal to 0, then I will call this alpha comma beta as the derivative of this function at the point xy. So derivative of xy. So derivative of xy, by the earlier definition, this derivative is in fact a linear map from R2 to R, because u is from R2 and range is in R. So it is a linear map here. So how that linear map is working? This linear map taking any point h comma k from R2 to alpha beta into hk, that is alpha h plus beta k. Now in R2, limit means what? See, in R, if I wanted to approach this point x naught, means I can approach from this direction or this direction only. But suppose I am in R2, I can approach from any direction. And whatever direction I approach, I should get a unique value. Limit x means that. Is that clear? In the case of R2, as limit x tends to x naught, if I say, this means this x and x naught are points in R2. This means to x naught, I can approach from any path from x. That value must be same. Then only you say that limit x is. So this limit, first I consider through x-axis. So limit hk going to 0 through x-axis or along x-axis. Suppose I look at along x-axis, that means k equal to 0. So this becomes limit h tends to 0, because that has become just h only, f of x plus h y minus f of x y minus alpha h, beta k will be 0 by h equal to 0. So you said you have some problem in are you able to see now the top line also?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So what I was telling is this limit hk tends to 0, I am taking along x-axis. That means what? Suppose the point is here, I am approaching along this line, x-axis. That means the increment in the other side, k will be 0. So I will get limit h tends to 0, f of x plus h y minus fxy minus alpha h by h equal to 0. What is this? Or I can write this as, instead of minus alpha h equal to 0, I can write up to this equal to alpha. Is that okay? Instead of writing minus alpha h by h equal to 0, I can write this equal to this up to this portion equal to alpha. Do you agree that?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
But what is this? I am giving increment only to x. Therefore, this is nothing but I am giving increment only to the x coordinate and taking the limit. What you will get? Partial derivative dou f by dou x at that point wherever you are evaluating. Okay, so this will be my alpha. Similarly, if I tend this to along y-axis, then this will be 0, h will be 0. So what I will get is beta equal to dou f by dou y. Is that clear? Same way, I am taking this hk tending to 0 along y-axis and substituting in this, I will get beta equal to dou f by dou y. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Therefore, I can replace this alpha and beta with alpha equal to dou f by dou x, beta is dou f by dou y. Therefore, I can write this total derivative df at the point xy is given by acting on some hk. This is given by dou f by dou x at the point xy, this acting on this into h plus dou f by dou y at the point xy into k. This is a number. So this number will give you the total derivative. So I can write this total derivative as dou f by dou x into h plus dou f by dou y into k. Or in some books, you might have seen df equal to dou f by dou x into dx. This increment they will write as dx plus dou f by dou y into dy. Have you seen this notation anywhere? df equal to dou f by dou x into dx plus dou f by dou y into dy. Yes? In BSc, you might have studied in this form.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
How it has come, is it clear? Is it clear the derivative for a function f from u to r where u is a subset of r2? Also you might have seen gradient of a function. So this function f is from u to r where u is subset of r2. So you have seen gradient of f as a vector dou f by dou x, comma dou f by dou y. So in this case, I can say this itself is my df, because df acting on some df xy acting on some hk, some vector is, because df is a linear map. df at xy is a linear map from R2 to R. So df acting on hk is dou f by dou x into x plus dou f by dou y. So this into h comma k. Suppose my u is in Rn. Suppose u is in Rn and the function f is from u to R. Okay. Suppose f is from u to R where u is in Rn. Then this I can write as gradient of f. I can write as dou f by dou x1, dou f by dou x2. Same thing I will repeat with n vectors, etc. Dou f by dou xn. Okay. Now suppose you have a function f from u to Rm. Thanks to Raji teacher, this is R we have to take for partial derivative. So I have taken u in Rn, then f from u to R. For that, I can define partial derivative with respect to x1, x2, etc., xn. Therefore, I will get the gradient del f as dou f by dou x1, dou f by dou x2, dou f by dou xn, n vector. Suppose I have this u to Rm. This f will have component functions f1, f2, etc., fm. And each component function fi is from u to R. Something like this. U to R. Each component function fi. Therefore, I can look at gradient of each component function del fi or del f1, del f2, etc., del fn. So if you have a vector valued function defined on a vector, u is also a vector. U comes from Rn. U is a subset of open subset of Rn. So you have a vector valued function defined on vectors. Then you have m functions associated to this f. Therefore, you have m gradients, because the partial derivative of each component function fi I can look at dou fi by dou x1, dou fi by dou x2, etc., dou fi by dou xn. That will be del fi. How many are there? I equal to 1, 2, 3, etc., m. Now, if f is differentiable, if this f is, that means total derivative exists, the linear map df at some point xy from Rn to Rm, this linear map exists, total derivative exists, then you can show that this df at xy is nothing but del f1 evaluated at xy, del f2 evaluated at xy, etc., del fm. If you write it completely, nothing but your Jacobi. Dou f1 by dou x1, dou f1 by dou x2, etc., dou f1 by dou xn, dou f2 by dou x1, etc., dou f2 by dou xn, etc. How many component functions are there? M functions are there. I hope you can see this. Dou fm by dou x1, etc., dou fm by dou xn. There is an m by n. M rows are there, so there is an m by n matrix. And this is nothing but the total derivative. If total derivative exists, then partial derivative exists, and you can show that evaluated at xy means all evaluated at xy means you will get a set, this matrix of order m by n with entries real numbers. In fact, you can show that matrix of order m by n is a linear map from Rn to Rn. I'm not going into that details, that you study in linear algebra. Therefore, total derivative you can write in terms of partial derivatives. And partial derivative exists and continuous only. If they are all continuous, then total derivative exists. I will not go into the proof of all such things. Now, suppose you have a function f from u to Rm, where u is an open subset of Rn. U comes from Rn. And if this derivative exists, df, that means all this partial derivative with respect to x1, x2, etc., xn for all component function exist and continuous, we say that f is a C1 function. That means f is differentiable and the derivative is continuous. Now I can see dou f by dou x1 is what? Dou f by dou x1 is again a function from u to r. f1 is a function or fi is a function from u to r. Therefore, dou fy by dou xj, some j equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. n. This is again a function from u to r. Therefore, I can talk about it is a function depending on n variables. So I can talk about its partial derivatives. So I will denote it by dou square fi by some dou xj dou xk, or dou cube fi by dou xj the whole cube. All type of partial derivatives I can look at. Differentiate this with respect to xj n times. That means dou n fi by dou xj n times. Okay, or I can look at mixed one, dou xj1, etc., dou xj n, in the sense this j1, j2, etc., jn varies over 1, 2, 3, etc. n. Like that, I can look at all partial derivatives. Suppose for this function, all partial derivatives of all orders exist and continuous, then we say that f is a smooth function, C infinity function, or smooth function. Okay, such functions are called smooth functions. And if you have a real valued function only here from u, that means no component functions. That means all partial derivatives dou f by dou x1, etc., and dou square f by dou x1, dou x2, etc., all exist. F is said to be smooth, and we denote the collection of all such smooth functions as C infinity u r. Set of all smooth functions, real valued functions defined on u. This is an important object for me or us in manifold. And you can show that here you can add two functions, f1, f2 functions are there, f1 plus f2 also a function, smooth function. And you can scale with some real number lambda, still it is a function from u to r. So in fact, or you can say that this is going to be a vector space. You can show that this is a vector space. Even more than that, you can give some structures to this, but I will go up to this. Okay, so the calculus on Rn, what I was stressing is looking at functions from open subsets of Rn to open subset of Rm. And most of the cases, what I have seen is you will be studying all these things, but when come for some PhD interview or something, you will just ask, give a function from R2 to R3 or R2 to R5. There it ends. So you will study all that functions with the components f1, f2, etc. Then you will study its continuity, differentiability, partial derivative, connection between total derivative and partial derivative. But once this question comes, gone. Because we know this f has how many components? 5 components you need. That means it is as good as defining 5 real valued functions on R. You can define real valued functions on R, no? You just take constant function, I can write c, etc. F of some point here go to 1, 1, 1, 1. That is also a function. Or I can define 5 different real valued functions and put it in this. So getting a function from any n dimension to any m dimension is very easy once you understood this. Okay. R2 to R, you know how to write functions, no? xy going to x projection, that is also a function, R2 to R. Or xy going to x plus y. So many functions you can define. Okay. So now now you have seen what is meant by smooth functions from open subset U in Rn to Rm. C infinity functions or smooth functions. That means from whatever direction you look, it is having a smooth property here. There is no edge for the graph from whatever side you look. Okay, suppose this function is a smooth function such that if I look at f from u to some w here, w in Rm, and suppose f is 1, 1, on 2, and f inverse is also smooth. That means f has partial derivatives of all orders exist and they are all continuous. Now f inverse is also having partial derivative from w to u having partial derivatives of all orders and continuous, then such a function is said to be a diffeomorphism. You have seen isomorphism in algebra, then you have seen homeomorphism in topology, same kind of thing here, diffeomorphism. Some kind of calculus property it is identifying here. More than that, you will see that. So such functions are called diffeomorphisms. If function from u to w, where u is in Rn, w is in Rm, which is 1, 1 on 2, smooth, and its inverse is also smooth, it is called a diffeomorphism. For example, you might have seen polar coordinate, no? Suppose I take r varies from 0 to infinity. Suppose I take cross product with 0 to 2 pi to some subset of R2 again. Suppose I look at this function, psi of, here the variable I take r, here the variable I take theta, r cos theta, r sin theta. Can you say what is V? It cannot be in the entire R2 because I am not including 0. That means r equal to 0 is not there, or theta is from theta is in the open interval 0 to 2 pi only. So can you say what is this V? You are omitting this point. What about any point on the positive x-axis? Will it come into this? Because cos 0 is not there, cos 2 pi is not there. Therefore, this V is R2 minus positive real axis, including x equal to 0, including this point. And removing this line. So this is nothing but an open rectangle, no? In the polar coordinate. This is a wedge kind of thing. You take r varies from 0 to 0 is not included. So 0 to infinity means and theta varies from 0 to 2 pi means r varies from 0 to infinity without 0 means the entire distance I have except this 0. Then theta varies from 0 to 2 pi means this line will not be there. Suppose I take r varies from 1 less than r less than 2 and theta varies in 0 less than or equal to theta less than or equal to pi by 4 means what? You are getting r is up from 1 to 2. From 1 to 2 means I have and theta varies from 0 to pi by 4. 0 to pi by 4. And in this r varies from 1 to 2 means I'll get this wedge. Here r varies from 0 to infinity. 0 is not there means only this point is omitted. All other points are there, but theta is not taking 0 or 2 pi means this line is omitted. So this is R2 minus the same thing. So I have given a map from this to this. R cos theta, R sin theta. You can show that this function is, see, how will you check continuity? You look at the component functions and see they are continuous. This R theta going to R cos theta is continuous, R theta going to R sin theta is continuous, R theta going to R is continuous projection, R theta going to cos theta is continuous, then you can show these things are continuous, then differentiable, derivative of any order exists with respect to R and theta, its inverse also exists. Okay, so this is a homeomorphism. Another homeomorphism I can give is, suppose you look at the quotient space, you might have seen, if somebody has discussed quotient topology, you might have seen R by Z. What is this object? You look at real line, take any number R, then form the coset R plus Z. What is that? So from this to circle S1, take any x here, map it to e to the power ix. So what is this object? Since it is a homeomorphism, you can at least say, without, even if you have not realized it or you are not able to visualize it, this is nothing but circle only. How it becomes circle? I'm leaving to you. You might have seen it. Somebody might have discussed quotient topology, so you might have seen R by Z. You might have seen. So this is also a homeomorphism. Okay, so okay. So now we wanted to go to manifolds. Okay. So first I will define topological manifolds. So yesterday we have discussed about differential topology, no? And we said the basic object in differential topology is manifold. Okay, so first I will discuss topological manifolds. A topological space M is said to be an n-dimensional topological manifold if it has the following properties. First one, M is Hausdorff. M is second countable. Third property is M is locally Euclidean. These two are familiar now. So you start with a topology space which is Hausdorff, second countable, and it is locally Euclidean. Locally Euclidean means, so this means that is for every point P, for every point P in M, there exists an open set U containing P, which is homeomorphic to an open set in Rn. Now we understood why we first try to understand Rn. Because what we are saying is that some M is said to be a topological manifold. First of all, it is a topological space. Then that should be Hausdorff and second countable. Then for any point P, we should be able to find some open set U and a map, say phi to Rn, such that U going to some U tilde or U tilde equal to phi of U. This phi must be a homeomorphism. Homeomorphism means phi must be continuous, 1, 1, on 2, and inverse also continuous. That means I can identify this open set U with an open subset in Rn. Identify in what sense? As topological sets. Okay, up to topology. I can identify this set with an open subset of Rn. So if I can do this for any point, whatever point I give in M, you should be able to produce some open set which I can identify with some open subset in Rn. Then we say that this M is locally Euclidean. For any point, there exists an open subset. Now you understood why the second countability is important. That means I am covering M with open subsets, and those open subsets are homeomorphic to open subsets in Rn. That cover I wanted to have countable cover. That's all. If you look at what we are trying to look at here is a topological space which we have made locally Euclidean. What is the advantage of making it locally Euclidean? We are identifying this with this subset of Rn. For any point here, you have coordinates. Suppose I take a point Q here, then I have phi of Q here. Phi of Q will have coordinate some x1 of Q, etc., xn of Q. So this U comma phi, usually we used to call a coordinate chart or just chart of M, where U is an open subset in M and phi is a homeomorphism from U to phi of U, where phi of U is an open subset of Rn. This is called a coordinate chart. And this, for any point Q here, phi of Q will be written using this coordinates x1, Q, etc., xn. This x1, x2, etc., xn, they are called local coordinates. Local coordinates. Of course, if I can cover this completely with a single open set, the M itself, and I can give a homeomorphism to Rn, I'll get a global coordinate. Single chart. But that is always not possible. If you have some curved surfaces, etc., that is not possible always. Therefore, we will make, suppose you have, I'll give some example later. So suppose you have some topological space. For each point, you have an open set identified with an open subset in Rn, identified in the sense that topologically homeomorphism, then this U comma phi is called a coordinate chart, and this x1, x2, etc., xn, it is called local coordinate. Okay. I'll give one example now. So topological manifolds are clear to all of you? I want to hear some sound from the other side.
Yes, sir.
Because I have to check whether my gadgets are working or not. Otherwise, whatever I said will be heard only this voice. So now topological manifolds are clear to you. Now I'll give one example. Easy example is take Rn and look at identity map. Because you have Rn here, I'm defining it as a topological n manifold, n-dimensional topological manifold. So I will take the identity. So the entire thing, for any point, the open set containing that I consider as the entire Rn. Therefore, my U is Rn. My phi is identity map. So all Euclidean spaces I can make, or all, I will not say Euclidean space, because what I have defined Euclidean space is a vector space with norm, etc. But more than that, we have given a structure, topological structure. So this Rn as topological spaces, I can consider it as a topological manifold by looking at this. Or Another, anyway, that I will come later. Another way also I can look at it, that I will come later. Now another example I can give is, so this is an n-dimensional topological manifold. Suppose I have S1 circle, collection of all x, y such that x square plus y square equal to 1. Okay, suppose I have this circle. Then I'll see, I wanted to introduce coordinate charts here. I cannot take the entire S1 as that, and I cannot give a homeomorphism. We have seen some example, at least one case we have seen. Okay, so what I will do here is I will take U1 plus as collection of all xy in S1 such that x greater than 0. That means this part, this open arc, and we have already studied open arcs are the open set in S1. So this is an open subset of S1. See, what is the topology that, see, you have to start with a topology space. Rn is a topology space, already we have discussed. What about S1? Is it a topology space? Is S1 a topology space? Can you make it as a topology space? This also we discussed, in fact, using the subspace topology. S1 is sitting inside R2. Do you remember that? Then suppose for this point, if I wanted to find out an open subset in S1 containing this point, means what I will do for this point in R2, I will first consider an open set, that is disk. Then intersect with S1, that means I'll get this open arc. So open arcs are the open sets. Collection of all open arcs, we will give you a topology on S1. It's a space topology. Is it Hausdorff? S1 Hausdorff? There are only two answers you can give, or three also you can give. Yes, no, or I don't know. Is S1 Hausdorff?
Yes.
Yes, because suppose I give 2 points, you take very small disk, two disks which are not intersecting. That disk will give you two arcs which are not intersecting containing these 2 points. So it is Hausdorff. Of course, it is subset of R2, so you can cover with countable number. You take that Q cross Q, every arc with some element from Q cross Q. So that will be covering that. So it is Hausdorff second countable. Now I am giving a locally Euclidean structure to this. So consider this. This is an open subset of R1, S1. This open arc is an open subset. Now I will define the map phi1 plus from U1 plus to R. In fact, not to the entire R. I will define it to -1 to 1 because this is -1 to 1. So what I am going to do is I am projecting to the y axis. I am projecting this to the y axis. That means phi1 plus of x comma y will be y. This is a map from U1 plus to -1, 1. All of you are, I am just projecting this to this line. Okay, so this map is well defined. Is it continuous? Projections are continuous. I'm not going to prove. You have to do that. I think this we discussed when we, at least first semester students may be knowing. Okay, this is a continuous map. Is it 1, 1? Of course. On to? It is 1, 1 on to continuous. What about its inverse? What is the inverse of this? Phi1 plus inverse. Any t from here going to? This y will be kept as it is, t will be kept as it is. What will be the first coordinate? Is a point in S1. No, what will be the first coordinate? Root of 1 minus t square. This is your x and this is your y. What is x square plus y square?
1.
1. But when I take root, there is a plus and minus. Which root you will take, plus or minus?
Plus.
Plus, because you are in this segment. That means set of all xy with x greater than 0. So I am putting only root 1 minus t square. That means it is plus root. Okay, this is the inverse function. So inverse function exists. Is it continuous? T going to t is continuous, no doubt. This is a function from where to where? Phi1 plus is a function from one dimensional to two dimension. You are discussing about Rm to Rn, no? M and N can be any number. So one dimension to two dimension. Very easily you can define. You take t going to t comma t. That is also another function. Then checking continuity means each coordinate, how many coordinates are there? Two. This will have two coordinates. T going to t one function, t going to t another function. In this case, t going to root 1 minus t square. This is t square. T going to t, both are continuous. Positive square root of 1 minus x going to root x. Okay. So this function is 1, 1, 1, 2, continuous, inverse also continuous. So it is a homeomorphism. So this part I have identified with an open subset of R. What is that open subset? Minus 1 to plus 1. Now I look at this part. That means U2 plus collection of all x, y in S1 such that x less than 0. Why I am not taking equal to 0? Then I will not get open set. Open arc which only open here. So I need to take less than 0. So where will you map? That means this portion. Where will you map it? Again to y, project it to y axis. So here xy goes to y again. Similarly, I will consider this portion. So this portion means collection of all xy such that y less than 0. So xy goes to x, that is the map. Again from minus 1 to 1 only. Similarly, I will consider this portion. So I am splitting this into 4 open subsets. Then only I can get full cover. If I take these two only, these 2 points will be missing. If I take these two only, these 2 points will be missing because I cannot take closed arc, only open arc. So to complete this, I am splitting it into one arc here, second arc here, third arc here, fourth arc here. And each one is projection to minus 1, 1. That means I have collection of this U1 plus, this I should write U1 minus, no? Because x less than 0. U1 minus, U2 plus, that means y coordinate positive, U2 minus. Then the corresponding functions are, this will cover S1 and the corresponding functions I will denote by phi1 plus, phi1 minus, phi2 plus, phi2 minus. Therefore, this will form a coordinate chart. This also a coordinate chart. Put together, you have a coordinate chart which covers the entire S1. So for any point you take, I have an open set which is identified with minus 1, 1. Therefore, it is a one-dimensional topological manifold. Is that clear? Take any point in this S1. Now I have an open set. Anywhere you take a point, some open set will contain that. This one of this 4 will contain that. And your map, corresponding map will map that open set to the interval, open interval minus 1, 1. Therefore, locally Euclidean with one-dimensional open sets. Therefore, this is a one-dimensional topological manifold. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now I will ask a question. Suppose I consider x square plus y, set of all xy sets is that x square plus y square plus z equal to 1. Suppose this is my set, x, y is set in R3. This is nothing but your sphere, S2 in R3. Is it a topological space? Is it a topological space?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
As a subset of R3, as a subset of R3, this S2, you can make it a topological space. What are the basic open sets here? What are the basic open sets in R3? What are the basic open sets in R3?
Open balls.
Open ball is a common name, but what is that object? Open ball in R is open interval. Open ball in R2 is open disk. What is the open ball in R3?
Sphere.
Sphere. Exactly. Good. Set of all x, y, z, x square plus y square plus z square less than R. Equal to will not be there. That boundary will not be there. Or that equal to that will not be there. So it is a solid one. Then suppose I take this S2, which is like a football. I'm taking equal to 1 means only all vectors of unit length. I can also express this unit sphere as all vectors with length 1. That means I don't have inside points like a football. Now I take a point here. Then consider an open ball in R3 centered at this point P. That means you have a sphere, solid sphere here. Some solid sphere. What is the intersection of that solid sphere with this football? Intersection of, suppose I have a point P, I have taken some small radius epsilon, then I looked at the sphere there, solid sphere like shot put or laddu. Of course, you have to make the laddu properly. Then intersect with the football at the point P, intersect with the football, what you will get?
P.
Pardon? P is a point in this S2. Now you intersect the ball centered at P, that means the solid sphere centered at P with this football. What you will get?
Open disk.
Open disk only. An open disk only here. So each place you will get open disk. So when you take a sphere here, solid sphere, intersect with this, I'll get open disk here. So open disk are open here. So if I, instead of considering S1, if I consider S2 for each point, I can take some open disk covering that, and that open disk I can map to, using some homeomorphism, I can map to an open disk in R2. Can you tell me what is this map? Exactly like this. Suppose you, this also you divide into how many? Not 4 is not enough here, 8. You look at your corner of the room, you have x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. Are you able to visualize that?
Yes, sir.
How many octants are there? 4 in your room and 4 the below. 4 plus 4, 8. So if I put a football there, that football I can separate into how many? Not like this 4, but you have in all portions xi greater than or equal to 0, xi greater than 0, xi less than 0, yi greater than 0, yi less than 0, all these things will come together. So I'll get 8. Are you able to visualize that? Set of all x, y, z such that x greater than 0, x less than 0, y greater than 0, y less than 0. How many you will get? Z greater than 0, Z less than 0. 3 plus 3. Okay. Then identify, suppose I take the upper hemisphere, that means Z greater than 0. Flatten it, it is a disk. Suppose I look at this upper hemisphere, flatten it is a disk. Is that clear what I'm saying? Set of all x, y, z says that x square plus y square plus z square equal to 1 and z greater than 0. You flatten it to the xy plane, then you will get x square plus y square less than or equal to 1. That means you are projecting that to x comma y. Here you have projected to one variable, there you have to project it to two variables. Therefore, each open set for any point, each open set is identified with an open set in R2. Therefore, it is a two-dimensional object. It is a topological two-manifold. Okay. Similarly, n-sphere is a topological n-manifold. The same way you can look at so many examples. I'll not go into all those examples. Next. See, our aim is to look at smooth manifold, not because differential topology, as we have discussed yesterday, it uses both geometry and analysis to study the topological properties. So just giving coordinates not enough. I wanted to discuss calculus there. So suppose you have a manifold M there. Suppose you have a topological n-dimensional topological manifold. Suppose I have a point P here. Then I can produce some U open subset which is homeomorphic to an open subset in Rn. P of U, I'll write. This is in Rn. Suppose I have considered another open set V containing this. By definition, I can find some homeomorphism to some subset here. V. This is also a homeomorphism. Therefore, for the points here, we'll get coordinates here as well as here also that portion will be there. So I'll get coordinates here as well as coordinate, two different coordinatization for the same point. Is it clear what I'm saying? We said topological manifold means locally you can make it into Euclidean space. That means for any point, you can produce some open set which is homeomorphic to an open set in Rn. Suppose I have taken this open set U and given this homeomorphism. Somebody else has taken this open set V containing P and homeomorphic to some open subset in Rn. Therefore, these points will have two different coordinates. With two different coordinates for a point, I cannot talk about calculus. No, I cannot do any calculus thing. So I need to identify these two. I need to identify these two open subsets. So what I will do, I need to identify means I need to give the coordinatization here in a unique way. What we will do is we look at this part is nothing but this part is nothing but phi of U intersection V. This is psi of U intersection V. U, V are open, therefore U intersection V is also open because this is a topology space. Therefore, psi of U intersection V, psi of U intersection V, both are open subsets of Rn. Now I look at this map. That means a point here will go here, then come back here. That means first I will put phi inverse, then psi. So this portion and this portion will be identified by, or I can have a map like this. So any coordinate here for this point, any coordinate x1p, etc., xnp, another coordinate ynp, etc., ynp, I can identify with this map. And we demand that this map is a smooth map. Smooth in the sense 1, 1 on 2, differentiable any number of times, inverse also exists, differentiable any number of times. Therefore, I call this is smooth and inverse is also smooth. Such maps are called diffeomorphisms. Diffeomorphisms. So to get rid of this difficulty, getting two different coordinates, what we will do is we identify these coordinates in a nice manner. We say that there is a diffeomorphism or this map, which is mapping phi of U intersection V to psi of U intersection V. We demand this map should be a diffeomorphism. Then we say that these two coordinate charts u phi and v psi are compatible. Some people say smoothly compatible, etc. Whatever it is, compatible. This means the intersection portion, if you look at the coordinatization there, you have identified that using a diffeomorphism. So as far as when we wanted to look at in the calculus point of view, these two coordinates serves the same purpose. Because you can move from here to there or there to here, because this is smooth with inverse also smooth. That means Jacobian not equal to 0, or it is differentiable in number of times, inverse also differentiable in number of times. Such coordinate charts are said to be compatible. Now we say that suppose you have some collection of coordinate charts such that, so I'll take a collection u alpha, phi alpha, collection of coordinate charts, where alpha varies over some set, because it is countable, no? I can make it countable. These are coordinate charts such that whenever intersection is there, such collection of coordinate charts is called an atlas. Like in your geography thing, if you are asked to make some atlas, some people cover this area, some people have intersection, but intersection you should have same thing, no? Whatever you have identified should be matched with whatever the other person has. So it is like forming atlas. That is why this is called also atlas. So this u alpha that covers M, that means M is contained in the union of u alpha, and u alpha phi alpha is coordinate chart. That means phi alphas are homeomorphisms to open subsets in Rn. And if you demand that whenever u alpha intersection u beta is non-empty, either u alpha intersection u beta is empty, whenever it is non-empty, these are called transition maps. Transition maps. Here if I call phi alpha, phi beta, then I have phi alpha inverse composed with phi beta. This will be the transition. Such map, whenever this is non-empty, this map should be diffeomorphism. Then we say that this atlas is a smooth atlas. And a topological manifold M together with a smooth atlas is called a smooth manifold. So A is smooth atlas. Smooth atlas in the sense, if the, see, A will have coordinate charts countable in number, and if this u alpha and u beta are either not non-intersecting, or if some of the u alpha u beta intersect, then the corresponding transition maps are diffeomorphisms. Then we call A as a smooth atlas. And once you make this diffeomorphism, actually these maps also becomes like that, smooth only. I will not go into such details. So such a thing is called a smooth manifold. How much time left? Very little time. But here there is a, and whatever you have defined that S1, see in S1 what I have taken this as U1 plus, then I have taken this as U2 plus. So there is an intersection. This part is the intersection part. And this, both of this is identified to -1, 1. This also identified to -1, 1. And you can see the this map is phi1 plus xy going to y. This map is phi2 plus xy going to x. You can show that these maps are, the transition maps are smooth. I will not go into the details. You can work out that. You can just see that because time is up. So I wanted to stress that this topological space along with this collection of charts such a way that in intersection, this transition maps are diffeomorphism. Such object is called a smooth manifold. One example is this S1 itself. Another example I can give is Rn itself. With identity map. So there is no transition map or anything. Another way I can give an atlas to this. This is an atlas because it covers M M is Rn, and you have the homeomorphism, it is smooth, etc. Everything is fine. Another atlas I can find is, I look at all open balls of some radius for points points xy in points x in Rn. Xi mean x1, x2, etc. xn, where x belongs to Rn, this r greater than 0. This is my U. Then I look at identity map restricted to this Brx. So this is my atlas. So what is the atlas in Rn? The current one is Rn is there. For each point, I look at the open ball with some radius r. Then the map phi alpha is identity restricted to this ball. So I will take in Rn the ball. This also will give you an atlas because collection of all such open balls will cover Rn, and whenever intersection comes, I can show that it is nothing but a diffeomorphism. Therefore, for the same space Rn, I have two types of coordinates atlas, two types of atlas. So how do you overcome such kind of situation? We look at, what we do is, we define something called maximal atlas. How will you define maximal atlas? We will say that this A equal to U alpha phi alpha is maximal if you give any other coordinate chart U phi. Suppose this U phi is compatible with all U alpha phi alpha, then U phi is also a member here. So if you have an atlas and if you have another atlas, suppose the coordinate charts here are compatible with, compatible means what? Intersection is there. In that intersection, if you define the transition map, if they are diffeomorphic, we will say that this is compatible with this. Then I will include that also there. In that way, I can get a maximal one. Therefore, we will consider M together with maximal smooth atlas. That is called a smooth manifold, C infinity manifold or smooth manifold. But the practical difficulty is, for any topology space given, how will I attain this maximal one? I can get an atlas by looking at this topology space covered by open sets. I will cover with some number of countable number of open sets. For each open set, I will define phi alpha. I can get an atlas. But getting a maximal atlas is not that easy. But this is enough. So practically, to get a manifold structure on a topology space, what you have to do is, you cover this with open sets, then look at that, because every atlas will be contained in a unique maximal atlas. Therefore, that is enough. Therefore, to define a smooth manifold or differentiable manifold, what you need to do is take a topology space, look at an open cover, identify each open set with an open subset of Rn if it is n-dimensional. That is enough. So all this difficulty will be ending there. You will get the smooth with that you can work, because every atlas will be contained in a unique maximal atlas. And there are problems like, for a same space, you can give two different structures, etc. I will not go into all those things. But this is the way you look at smooth manifolds. And getting this atlas business is, just take an open cover, map this open sets, identify open sets with open sets in Rn using diffeomorphisms, or you take the transition maps are diffeomorphism, automatically the coordinate functions also, the coordinate chart, the coordinate map phi alpha also becomes smooth and having inverse smooth. Such objects are called smooth manifolds. I thought of telling something else, I forgot. Anyway, so I hope you have got an idea about smooth structures on topological manifold. Okay. Now I think I don't have time to go further, so I'll stop here. example again, we have just seen this Rn and also circle. That is also a smooth manifold. Sphere is also a smooth manifold, etc. So I think I will stop here. Already the time is up. So if you have some doubts, I will try. Some comments are there. Let me see. Oh, references. References. I'm poor in remembering names. Introduction to Smooth Manifolds by Lee, I think. LW. Of course, Jürgen Jost is there for a more rigorous kind of thing. All either Riemannian manifolds they call or smooth manifolds they call. I told no, in differential geometry we look at some more tools like curvature, connection, etc. Some books deals with that also. This Lee's book is a good one. There are, so I can give my email ID. So you just Google, you will get a lot of books. Only thing you have to select the best, good books. See, I told no, anything that we want to learn, experience is a matter. That is the way all these things have come up. No, great scientists used to say, no, they were standing on shoulders of so many people. No, all those works. So the experience in studies means reading books. That too, reading good books. So you can just smusad@gmail.com. Right now, I don't have any. Okay, if you Google, you will get a lot of books. You can see which one is handy for you. And if you have any doubts, you can just mail me. Okay, then. Thank you very much for listening in the odd hours or evening time where we want to relax. Most of us wanted to relax in the evening. But once you have determined to do something in that time, we will definitely do with whatever work you have. So with that only, I have also spent some time with you. Thank you for that.
So, okay, so I'm here to thank my own teacher, Musad sir. So on behalf of the department, alumni, that's the team behind this program, and the participants here, and on my own behalf, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to our sir, Subramanian Musad sir. Thank you very much, sir, for your talks that were very motivational, especially to our PG students, and for the efforts towards your bringing first the topic calculus on Rn, then the derivative of vector valued functions, then taking us nicely to the topic topological and differentiable manifolds. Like, thank you, sir, for such an excellent coverage to it. I wish if there were one more day for you, you would have covered this inverse and implicit function theorem also. That's like, so I felt like I'm back in my MSc classes also. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
We are here in the end of the virtual national workshop on topology in honor of Professor Ramachandran PT, organized by alumni of the Department of Mathematics, University of Calicut. Now, on behalf of alumni, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have contributed to this workshop. First of all, we thank the resource persons, Professor A.J. Jayanthan, Professor Ramachandran PT, and Professor K.S. Subramanian Musad for accepting our invitation and sharing their ideas. Even in this pandemic situation, they made the sessions more informative and interactive in the virtual platform. I'm sure that their classes are truly inspiring for everyone who participated in this webinar. Now I express my sincere gratitude to all participants for sparing their valuable time for attending this workshop and making this venture a great success. Now it is a great pleasure that we have participants from most of the states in India. I extend my sincere thanks to our beloved HOD, Dr. Preeti Kuttipilakal, for her continuous support. And I also thank my colleagues in the Department of Mathematics for their sincere support. Next, I thank Ms. Arjuna for designing an elegant and attractive brochure for us. And I also express my indebtedness for the cooperation and valuable suggestion from alumni members, Professor T.V. Ramakrishnan, Dr. N.M. Madhavan Nambudiri, Dr. Kavita, Dr. Srija, Dr. Danya, and Dr. Santosh. I would like to thank my students, Shruti, Angela, and Darshana for being along with me in the program and especially for their e-helps. Finally, I thank anyone missed in this list who have contributed directly or indirectly for this success. Thank you.